Hi, everyone. I'm Garrett Hake in for Allison Morris. You're watching NBC News Now, and here's what's happening. The stage is set. In less than 24 hours, President Biden and Vladimir Putin will come face to face. This morning, the president landing in Geneva, feeling optimistic after wrapping up his meeting with EU leaders.
Well, I think we have a great opportunity to work with the EU as well as NATO earlier, and we're feeling very good about it.
Meanwhile, back in D.C., Attorney General Merrick Garland is rolling out the administration's new strategy to combat the rising threat of domestic terrorism.
Our experience on the ground confirms this. The number of open FBI domestic terrorism investigations this year has increased significantly.
And today, we're taking a closer look at America's crumbling infrastructure. From pipes to roads to bridges, how does the U.S. compare with the rest of the world? The answer may surprise you. We start today with the final countdown to President Biden's meeting with Vladimir Putin. NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba is in Geneva. And Monica, take us behind the scenes right now. What's the president doing to finish getting ready for this summit? Who's prepping him?
He landed just a couple of hours ago, Garrett. He met with the president of the Swiss Confederation, and then he went to his hotel to continue preparations ahead of that high-stakes face-to-face summit tomorrow with Vladimir Putin. There's nothing on his agenda for later this evening, as the sun did just set here in Geneva. And then there's nothing on the agenda for tomorrow morning either, before a 1 p.m. local start time for those discussions, which we now know will take place over the course of as many as 4 to 5 hours. It could stretch beyond that, including the independent press conferences that both leaders are going to hold after they wrap up. In terms of who is briefing him and who's helping him prepare, we know that that process actually started a couple of weeks ago before he even left Washington for Europe. He did convene a group of about 10 experts who come from outside the Biden administration, who had experience meeting with or being in the same room as President Putin on several occasions. So he wanted to make sure that he got a different and varying sense of input from them, in addition to the world leaders who he's been meeting with. In fact, that was built into his prep. These last 6 days of summits at the G7, at NATO, and at the US-EU meeting that wrapped up today, that's where the president says he got some of the most valuable thoughts and input on his upcoming meeting with Vladimir Putin. And one, he says that all of those foreign heads of state actually thanked him for taking this meeting. As we know, there had been some criticism about whether this could be viewed as a reward for the Russian president. Garrett.
The president kind of feeling out those foreign policy muscles. Mon, the White House is downplaying expectations for this meeting. People familiar with the planning telling NBC News they think the best case scenario for Biden is likely to be an error-free summit, and headlines back here in the States saying he delivered a tough message, in contrast to former President Trump's chummy attitude towards Putin. But if that's the best case scenario, what are the other scenarios the Biden team expects, and what's the worst case?
And a lot of this is just that, an expectations game, trying to downplay this so that they feel the president is in the best position heading into it and not wanting to get ahead of a lot of what may happen tomorrow and a lot of the theatrics and the unexpected things that, of course, can always play out at an event like this. But what we do know from White House officials is they've essentially said, don't expect any major deliverables. And if that's something you're going to be waiting for, in the words of one of them, you're going to be waiting a very long time. So in the view of the U.S. here, they believe they can make some progress on basically lifting relations from an all-time low point between the U.S. and Russia ever so slightly. And that, in their view, they would be successful if the president does indeed confront President Putin on the very long list of things that he plans to do. If he's able to get to all of those things, they will view that as a good session and the start, they hope, on some potential areas of cooperation as well. So while we know the president, of course, is going to be calling out Putin on things like cybersecurity and the ransomware attacks we've seen lately, there will also be discussions on climate change, on arms control, potentially on containing Iran's nuclear ambitions, areas they believe that coming out of this summit, both sides can say we're going to continue to work together. And that's another important part of this in terms of how the U.S. is going to try to frame it if they believe it goes well. But we're going to get the president's own assessment of that when he does his own independent news conference, of course, not wanting to give President Putin that side-by-side joint newser like we saw with former President Trump in Helsinki 3 years ago.
Monica, President Biden also met with European Union leaders this morning, and they ended a long-running trade dispute involving Airbus and Boeing. What can you tell us about this agreement and what it means for the U.S.?
Really bringing a close to something that has been extremely complicated for about 16 years. So yes, the U.S. and EU announcing that both sides are going to be stopping their tariffs on each other, at least for the next 5 years. And this is major progress, something that had really escalated under the Trump administration and that trade war that we saw play out in so many different industries, but certainly in this one, and one that was quite pronounced. And there is also hope, they believe, that coming out of some of these meetings, there can be progress on some of the steel and aluminum tariffs that are still in place, something that the European leaders really did convey to President Biden they would like to see a shift in. So they committed, as this summit wrapped up today, to trying to come to an agreement or reach a resolution on that. But the news of Boeing and Airbus, a very significant step, is something, again, that now the U.S. can argue was something they came away with, at least up until this point, even if there isn't much in terms of a, quote, deliverable out of the summit tomorrow with Putin. Garrett.
And Monica, we had some breaking news just before we came on the air. President Biden unveiling a list of ambassador nominees. Any notable names there?
Absolutely, yes. We do know now that Thomas Nides is going to be the ambassador to Israel. He's somebody with some past experience, of course, in the Obama administration. Ken Salazar as well. He's going to be the ambassador to Mexico. And a name many people may recognize, Sully Sullenberger, of course, the former pilot who helped land that plane heroically on the Hudson. He has been named to an aviation safety board. So we're still waiting on some of the other names that NBC News has reported of people who are in the works for potential posts, people like Rahm Emanuel and Eric Garcetti. Those were not on the list today. We expect those to come, but the president and the White House were under tremendous pressure to try to get some of these foreign posts and ambassadorships out while the president was on this first overseas trip, and a show that this was a major area of progress as well as all of this is happening on the international stage. Garrett.
Busy week on the foreign front. Monica Alba in Geneva. Monica, thank you.
The domestic violent extremist threat is also rapidly evolving. As FBI Director Wray has noted, we continue to observe actors driven by a diverse set of violent motivations.
That's Attorney General Merrick Garland announcing the Biden administration's new national strategy to counter domestic terrorism. NBC News correspondent Ken Delaney joins us now from Washington. And Ken, the administration says this new strategy is focused on violence. What exactly does that mean, and how does this plan fight domestic terror?
Garrett, the U.S. intelligence community has said for some years now that the threat from domestic terrorism has eclipsed the threat from al-Qaeda and ISIS as the top danger facing the United States in terms of terrorism. And this strategy is really an attempt to get the government on board with that, to raise the level of effort across agencies. And they're talking about 4 pillars. And let's hear the Attorney General Merrick Garland explain what those are.
First, our efforts to understand and share information regarding the full range of domestic terrorism threats. Second, our efforts to prevent domestic terrorists from successfully recruiting, inciting, and mobilizing Americans to violence. Third, our efforts to deter and disrupt domestic terrorist activity before it yields violence. And finally, the long-term issues that contribute to domestic terrorism in our country must be addressed.
There's a lot of dense bureaucratic language there, but the most important part of this is that there's a real emphasis on the FBI playing a greater role in investigating and prosecuting these cases, and on the Department of Homeland Security paying attention to what domestic extremists are saying on social media, Garrett.
Well, about that social media part of this, how are intelligence officials going to monitor this sort of thing without infringing on free speech? I know this has been a subject of a lot of debate.
Yeah, they're making a sort of a subtle distinction, which is DHS is saying, look, we don't care about the individuals. It's not our job to investigate. That's the FBI's job. We care about the broader narratives, the trends. So if hundreds of people are posting about attacking the Capitol, we need to pay attention to that collectively. Let's take a listen to what the DHS secretary had to say in explaining that.
So we don't monitor individuals on social media. What we do is we identify and analyze narratives that are perpetuated on social media. We see trends and potentially language with respect to a drive to violence, and we push that out to our state, local, tribal, territorial partners.
To be sure, Garrett, we're already hearing some criticism from conservatives and civil libertarians who are troubled by the idea of the government looking at social media in any capacity. Garrett.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's not going to satisfy everybody. I mean, what about those critics who say the focus on domestic terrorism is just code for targeting conservatives or right-wing activists? How does the administration respond to that?
They respond by saying that this policy is ideologically agnostic. And they, in fact, mention in the strategy some terrorist activity that was motivated from the left. For example, the shooting of the Republican baseball practice against members of Congress. And they're saying that, look, what we're focused on here is not the speech, not the ideology, but the violence, wherever it comes from. People who are talking about violence, inciting violence, and looking like they're about to commit violence, those are the people we want to pay attention to, Garrett.
Bringing it full circle to being about violence, not about speech. NBC News colleague Ken Delaney. And Ken, thank you.
Good to be with you. Thanks.
And the January 6th attack taking center stage on Capitol Hill today. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi huddling with committee chairs to discuss the next steps for investigating the insurrection. The House also holding two separate hearings digging into what happened. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell joins me now. And Leanne, let's start with the Speaker and her meeting with these committee chairs. What could be their next move? What are the options?
Well, they've laid out a few options, Garrett, and these are options that Speaker Pelosi said has been saying over the past couple weeks. And one option is making some changes to the January 6th Commission to accommodate some concerns from Senate Republicans, voting on that again, sending it back over to the Senate. Another option, create a select committee of a various group of Republicans and Democrats. It's essentially a new committee to investigate. They could empower the committees that already exist in the congressional structure to investigate, or they could also designate one committee to take the lead on this investigation. Now, there seems to be a lot of support for that last option because the top Republican on the Senate or the House Homeland Security Committee, which is the most likely committee that would take the lead, is John Katko. He is a Republican who created the framework for a January 6th Commission, someone who voted for the January 6th Commission. And so they think that they have perhaps a reliable working partner with this Republican. But Speaker Pelosi left a meeting with these chairs today saying that they have not yet decided, but we should hear some updates in the next couple of days, Garrett.
Well, and ironically, we had the House holding two hearings on the January 6th attack, two different committees, with witnesses including the FBI Director, Christopher Wray, and the U.S. Capitol Inspector General, Michael Bolton. What did we learn from those hearings about the law enforcement response on January 6th?
Well, the law enforcement response is specifically what they are focused on. And that's part of the problem, because what a January 6th Commission and what Democrats want is a much broader scope of what is investigated and what is looked into. And everything that has happened on Capitol Hill so far, the hearings that have happened, including the ones today, are focused specifically on the failures of intelligence, the failures of Capitol Hill leadership, Capitol Hill police leadership, and not really taking a look at the role of the former president, taking a look at the role of some members of Congress and the extremist groups, really, that led up to January 6th and why they were here. And so they're continuing to discuss these committees and debate and ask questions about the law enforcement component, but it's only one very small sliver of this very big story, Garrett.
And Leanne, we both spent our mornings chasing news on infrastructure, that bipartisan group of 10 senators struggling to win over support for their roughly $1 trillion infrastructure deal on both sides. Now you've got Democrats saying they'll push ahead with a partisan infrastructure plan on the House side. Give us the details here. Where does infrastructure actually stand right now?
Well, Democrats say that they're going to give some more time for these bipartisan talks to continue, see if they work out. But there's a lot of problems with these bipartisan talks. They can't figure out, once again, how to pay for it. This idea of a gas tax is something specifically that is holding it up. So while this is happening in one frame, you have Democrats who are extremely anxious to move forward and to start the partisan process. And that's something that they are doing. That's something that Senate Majority Leader Schumer said again that he is doing, that this partisan process is underway. But let's listen to how one member of House leadership, Representative Hakeem Jeffries, put it, and we'll talk on the other side.
The White House made clear to us in our conversations today that we're prepared to take a two-track approach. Of course, we're going to lean into the bipartisan discussions that are underway. With legitimacy and authenticity, we'd like to find common ground with the other side. These are important things to invest in for the American people, and the American people want to see us get that done. But if the obstructionists prevail, the self-described Grim Reaper prevails, then we are going to have to proceed to get it done through the vehicle that is available to us through reconciliation. But that is a conversation for another day.
A conversation for another day, but something that they are doing behind the scenes today. Now, Democrats say that something that has to be in this infrastructure proposal is a lot of work on climate change, a lot of the human infrastructure stuff that Republicans are unwilling to talk about. So this parallel track, this two-track process is currently happening, Garrett.
Happening and happening and happening as Infrastructure Week continues. Leanne Caldwell for us on Capitol Hill. Leanne, thank you.
Yep.
Go to NBC News Now correspondent Simone Boyce. She's following the latest headlines from NBCnews.com. Hey, Simone.
Hey, Garrett, well, we're going to start with this. It looks like the coronavirus may have actually been in the U.S. much earlier than we thought. A new study suggests COVID-19 first emerged in the country as early as December 2019. That's weeks before cases were recognized by health officials. Experts say there were probably rare and sporadic cases here, but COVID didn't actually become widespread until late February. And Gone Girl actor Lisa Baines has died. Baines was struck by an apparent hit-and-run driver in New York City more than a week ago. Her manager telling NBC News that she suffered a traumatic brain injury and was unable to recover. And over in Florida, authorities believe they've recovered the body of a man who died trying to rescue two other people. The 27-year-old was at Apollo Beach Nature Preserve on Friday when a father and son were swept away by a rip current. And after he went in to help, the three disappeared. Rescue crews had already recovered the other two bodies. And Southwest Airlines resuming business as usual today after grounding all flights last night because of an issue with its weather data provider. According to FlightAware, which is a website that tracks global airline cancellations, Southwest racked up nearly 1,400 delays yesterday due to the problem. That's the most of any airline on the planet. And Olympic runner Shelby Houlihan says she's been banned from competing for 4 years after a drug test turned up positive for a banned steroid. Now, Houlihan wrote on Instagram that she believes the test result was actually caused by eating a burrito she bought from a food truck just hours before taking that test. She says that eating pork can lead to a false positive since some pigs produce this steroid naturally. However, the Court of Arbitration for Sport did not accept her explanation of what happened. Lots of questions there. Garrett,
I'm not sure I accept that either. Elite runners eating pork burritos right before they race. I'm not sure I believe it. Simone Boyce, thank you. And an early end to additional unemployment assistance in Mississippi has businesses hoping to hire more employees. A drive-through fair today offering on-the-spot interviews and even job offers. NBC News Now correspondent Mara Barrett joins me now from the job fair in Batesville, Mississippi. And Mara, how much are the local businesses and potential workers relying on job fairs like this one? And what's the turnout been like?
Garrett, I know I'm now standing in an empty parking lot, but all day today that was not the picture. Tents and cars completely lined the Civic Center's parking lot here, and each tent was a business. 40 of those tents was a business looking to hire employees, and they were absolutely desperate. So job fairs like these, businesses, prospective employees, very reliant on each other right now, and it's a really hot market for those employees. I want to hear from some of the people that were here looking for jobs today.
Looking for a job whenever I can get my hands on.
There's some pretty good options out here, if I do say myself. There's a lot of options that I think everybody would be satisfied with.
I'm looking for a job. I worked for an attorney for 22 years, and he passed away with COVID back in January. And so I am in the job market. You know, that I started working there straight out of college, and that's the only job I've ever had. So I'm just new to all this and trying to, come to terms with what's going on and seeing what the job market's like. I haven't looked for a job in a long time. So I'm out just having fun, waving around. It's like we're in a parade. It's like, hey! So it's all fun. It's good.
Now, Mississippi is fully reopened despite its low vaccination rate. It's actually the lowest in the country, sitting at 28%. But these workers ready to get back to work despite that, and employers ready to welcome them back. But we came here in search of, are people coming because of the cancellation of those unemployment benefits, or is it because they're looking for other types of jobs? And actually what we found today, a lot of these people already have jobs, but they're taking advantage of the fact that employers are offering incentives, higher wages, new benefits in order to level up in their current jobs, Garrett.
Yeah, it's sort of a good time to be looking. Mara, some businesses are calling the federal pandemic unemployment payments unfair. How so?
Basically, these employers are saying because they have to offer jobs so quickly to employees, they've had to up their competition because every other company standing next to them is ready to offer on the spot as well with a higher rate or better benefits. And when the governor decided to make the call to cancel these unemployment benefits that we saw from the Fed earlier this past weekend, 55% of people in Mississippi were in support of that. A lot of employers I spoke to here today also in support of that. I want you to hear from Dale. He runs a company here that distributes to paper mills, and he's trying to expand his company because he's been doing well during the pandemic, but he's having a lot of trouble finding people who want to work for him. Take a listen to what he told me.
We are starting to see some applications come in, and some good applications for the first time in probably 6 months. I don't know how much that had to play with it. It depends who you talk to, but certainly we had it's been a real challenge the last year to hire.
Now, another business owner told me that this week is the first time she's starting to see some applications. Since March, they've only had 2 people interested in applying for jobs at her company building armored vehicles. But Dale also mentioned that while they're spending all of this time looking for labor, hiring up, finding creative ways to hire people, they're not as productive doing the actual work that their customers are paying for. And so that means that prices are even higher on the consumer end, Garrett.
All right, Mara Barrett for us in Batesville, Mississippi. Mara, thank you. California is now fully open after it was the first state to lock down at the beginning of the pandemic. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer has more on the changes and the new concerns.
Garrett, it's official here in California. The state is lifting nearly all COVID restrictions, but there are new worries about the Delta variant.
As health experts warn, the Delta variant will likely become the most dominant strain in the U.S. New data from the U.K. suggests COVID vaccines help block the mutation from leading to severe outcomes.
You guys are all doing your second Pfizer?
Yes. Researchers finding Pfizer's vaccine is 96% effective in preventing hospitalization for the fully vaccinated and 92% for AstraZeneca. The study reinforcing the push to inoculate more people.
If you're not vaccinated, you are more likely to get sick, more likely to need to go to the hospital, and probably more likely to die.
This, as the first state in the country to impose a COVID lockdown, has officially removed restrictions. Overnight, California dropping capacity limits and physical distancing requirements for businesses, meaning bars, restaurants, theme parks, and stadiums are allowed to fully reopen at max capacity.
It's great, especially since we've been separated, to finally come back together.
But rules on masking are less clear. While the unvaccinated are still required to wear masks indoors, the fully inoculated can go maskless in most places, likely even at work as soon as this week. Still, companies are allowed to set their own rules.
Businesses can require verification. Businesses have the freedom of choice.
As the nation reopens, a reminder of what we've lost. Lawmakers gathering at the Capitol to observe a moment of silence for the over 600,000 lives cut short by COVID.
Here in California, like in most states across the country, businesses are following the honor system. If you're vaccinated, authorities say they're going to take your word for it.
As COVID cases fall and the world reopens, many people are still at risk, including paroled prisoners, some of whom have been waiting to go home, some of them for up to a year. NBC News Now correspondent Priscilla Thompson has their tragic story.
This is my son. Oscar Villarreal's mom was overjoyed when in February of 2020, he made parole after serving 8 years in prison for a DWI. And I was so proud of him. I thought he was going to come home because he wrote a letter to me saying I'm coming home soon. 7 months later, he died from COVID-19 while working to complete an alcohol education program. He was just shy of his 61st birthday.
I knew he had to do the programs, but I didn't expect these programs to be 6 months or almost a full year. We were 3 months away, and to get that call was shocking and upsetting.
According to a new report by researchers at the University of Texas, at least 18 parole-approved inmates have died from COVID-19 while working to complete programs as a condition of their release. The report found that paroled inmates waited 5 to 11 months during the pandemic before being released. Today, there are more than 10,000 paroled inmates who remain behind bars, inmates like Brent Demby.
You know, I got kids I want to go home to with family. People dying around me. I mean, that's a terrifying situation. Repeating it in your mind, you know, am I going to make it out of this alive? You know what I mean?
Jeremy Diesel is a spokesman for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. He says there are only a few dozen active cases of COVID in the Texas prison system right now.
What do you say to those inmates that are still worried as they are sort of on the back end? They see the finish line and they're worried that they may not make it there because of COVID.
Make sure you're vaccinated.
Vaccines are now available to all Texas prisoners. Around 52% have received at least one dose, on par with national numbers. Much like in the outside world, the challenge now is hesitancy.
We had an incentive program for inmates where if they did receive the flu shot or choose to receive the flu shot, they would receive an item from the commissary that they, would not have to pay for. We used that same logic.
Christopher Crane is working to complete a drug education program at the Havens facility in Brownwood, Texas. For him, the incentives are having the opposite effect.
They were trying to get people ice cream or whatever, like M&Ms, whatever, to take this flu vaccine. I kind of get suspicious of what they're really trying to do. And that's the main reason why I wouldn't want to get the vaccine in here.
Mistrust is one issue. Misinformation, another.
My girl, her aunt took the shot and she had a stroke and she passed, so.
Both Crane and Demby declined the vaccine when offered.
People dying simply because they haven't been able to access the program that they needed. That's not fine.
Michelle Deitch is the director of the COVID Corrections and Oversight Project at the University of Texas.
Rehabilitative programs that prepare a person for reentry need to be front-loaded in the incarceration period. People who are at the point where they've been approved for parole, they should be able to complete those programs in the community.
This month, the Texas governor is expected to sign a bill that would allow for just that. The man who wrote it, a Republican lawmaker. Representative Tan Parker wrote House Bill 2352. The bill establishes a pilot program that would allow some paroled inmates to complete pre-release programs in the outside world under community supervision.
For these non-violent
drug offenses, and so forth. It's just much more productive for them and for society and for the taxpayer and for everyone involved to be able to put in place this kind of unique programming.
People don't often associate prison reform as a Republican priority, but it was a priority for you. Why?
If we can make a difference through better programming that gives them an opportunity to soar when they come out, that's what this country is all about.
Do you think that would have made a difference for Oscar?
Absolutely.
What is your message to the other families out there who are waiting for someone and worried?
You should be worried, because my brother, we were expecting him home. We were making holiday plans, and it was shocking. And it's still hard to believe that my mother, who is 92 years old, could get COVID and survive it, and her son didn't.
And Priscilla joins me now. Priscilla, I have to imagine prison medical teams don't have anything like the options for care. What can they do for people who are getting sick inside?
Right, Garrett. It's a complicated thing. We know that from speaking to prisoners that they often see folks go away and don't see them again for a while, and they're being isolated. And of course, prisons do have those medical units that are able to handle some symptoms. But if those symptoms do get very severe, prisons can take inmates to hospitals. But the real emphasis, officials tell me, is on outbreak prevention. And they are doing that by robust testing and also vaccinations. So inmates are tested randomly, and anyone who is coming in and out of these facilities visiting is also required to show a negative rapid test or show proof of vaccination. Garrett?
And given the availability and the prevalence of the vaccines, are inmates getting prioritized for shots given the risk they face just being in such close proximity?
Well, that was a very big concern for advocates, especially early on, because states were allocating these vaccine doses and prisoners weren't being prioritized despite being in these congregate higher risk settings. We do know in Texas, all prisoners are now eligible to receive that vaccine. But the challenge inside, much like in the outside world, is hesitancy. And that's not just hesitancy among prison inmates, but also among prison staff. Garrett?
Priscilla Thompson, appreciate your reporting on this story. Our NBC News series, America the Vulnerable, takes an in-depth look at where infrastructure stands in the U.S. In our latest installment, NBC News correspondent Tom Costello looks at how our systems measure up to other countries.
Yeah, hey, Garrett, good day. So, the United States economy is the biggest in the world, but we're not even in the top 10 in terms of the quality of our infrastructure. Here in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, 8% of the bridges are structurally deficient, including the Roosevelt Bridge between Virginia and Washington, built in 1964. And the chances are, no matter where you live, you see signs of decay every single day. How many times has it happened to you? You hit a pothole and it ruined your tires and rims.
I'm mad. I'm real upset. Because, we shouldn't have to drive on highways like this.
The nation's civil engineers warn America's underinvestment in infrastructure could undermine America's global competitiveness. Take bridges, for example. Of 600,000 nationwide, 46,000 are structurally deficient. The World Economic Forum ranks the U.S. 13th in infrastructure, behind countries big and small, including Singapore, Japan, South Korea, France, and the U.K. China is 36th and climbing, as it and other countries upgrade railroads, ports, airports, broadband, clean water, roads, and bridges. If you travel internationally, you've probably seen it yourself. Driving across Belgium, Austria, Switzerland, and Germany, the roads are in remarkable condition. In fact, I haven't driven across a single piece of chewed-up road or a pothole. And while the U.S. has only one high-speed train that briefly hits 150 miles per hour in the Northeast, Asian and European trains travel much faster. NBC's Claudio Lavagna on the Red Arrow, Rome to Naples.
This train will hit a top speed of 190 miles per hour. For decades, Europe has invested heavily in high-speed trains, from here in Italy in the south to Norway and Finland in the north, cutting down on air and road traffic and rushing people between cities.
I think they're absolutely fantastic, always on time.
Meanwhile, China is investing heavily across the board. NBC's Janice Mackey-Frayer is in Beijing.
China is already equipped with some of the world's biggest airports. This is Daxing. It's Beijing's newest. The plan now to build at least a dozen airports a year, and by 2035 to have enough high-speed rail lines to circle the Earth twice.
Back in the U.S.,
where is the ship going?
So this vessel will travel about 30 days. It is going to Vietnam, Hong Kong, 3 ports in China, and Singapore.
The Port of New Orleans is spending $1.5 billion just to accommodate the newest ships that carry double the cargo from Asian ports that are already big enough.
People need supplies. They need goods. That's how products get to stores. That's how products get to homes.
That global cargo traffic only increased during the pandemic. Importantly, in many countries with more modern roads, ports, and railroads, citizens do pay more in taxes. The U.S. Transportation Secretary says it is time for a big national upgrade.
We've been getting by on the investments that were made generations ago when we were willing to make big investments.
With America's competitiveness on the line, fixing the nation's infrastructure has bipartisan support. The sticking point is how much we're willing to pay. So a reality check on how much it would all cost. The civil engineers say about $2.6 trillion to bring the country up to competitive global international standards. And if we don't do that, we're going to lose trillions of dollars in the global economy and millions of jobs. But right now in Washington, it's a big fight, a big debate over how much to spend on infrastructure and whether taxes should be raised to make it happen. Garrett, you know that story even better than I.
For decades, South Bend, Indiana had a problem when it rained. Sewers would overflow, sending polluted wastewater into the St. Joseph River and creating a crisis that nearly bankrupted the city. But they found a creative solution: artificial intelligence. And now other cities are hoping to follow their lead. Here's NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman.
For a century, the St. Joseph River was South Bend's economic backbone, but it was also the sewer. Stormwater and sewage flowed through the same pipes into the river, then on to Lake Michigan.
The solution to pollution was dilution back then.
In the 1950s, the city built this treatment plant, but when it rained, it wasn't enough. Before the smart sewer, rainwater mixed with raw sewage would regularly overflow straight out of pipes like these, sending as many as 2 billion gallons a year of polluted water right into the river. The EPA said no more. But building new treatment plants would have cost $1 billion, practically bankrupting this working-class town of just 100,000. The solution? Should we open it up?
Yes.
All right. Artificial intelligence, 15 feet below ground.
So this box here is what is called a remote terminal unit.
When rain fills the sewer, these wireless sensors detect which pipes are full.
This sensor is able to detect the increased pressure and is able to transmit a signal.
Then play traffic cop, opening and closing valves to direct sewage to other pipes where there's still room, rather than the river. South Bend has 150 of these smart sensors that hang down into the sewer, detecting the water levels across the city every 5 minutes. Launched in 2012, the smart sewer has cut river overflows more than 70%, while saving more than $400 million. E. coli has been cut by more than half. Now other cities are adopting their own smart sewers. And South Bend's residents have flushed an environmental problem down the drain.
The amount of boaters, the amount of people that are swimming in this river all the time now, I think that's a result of the improved water qualities, that human beings are using the river more now than ever.
Josh joins me now. It's a fascinating story, Josh, and you got a firsthand look at these smart sewers. I have so many questions, but how long did it take to set this up in South Bend, and how expensive was it?
Well, Garrett, the smart sensors started going in 2008, but it wasn't until 2012 that they added the artificial intelligence that actually gets smarter and smarter every year as it takes in more and more data from those sensors. So, for example, when Notre Dame plays football, up to 80,000 fans packed into a stadium, the smart sewer now anticipates those halftime flushes and actually creates more room in the sewers underneath the stadium to accommodate those halftime flushes, as gross as that may sound. And as far as the cost, $275 million they spent on this system, which if you compare it to the $1 billion from what they initially envisioned, from what the EPA wanted them to do, huge savings for the city of South Bend and its residents.
That's incredible. The sewer knows the Fighting Irish football schedule. We know that these wastewater problems are a growing infrastructure issue across the country. Are there other cities that are applying this same fix?
Yeah, there are more than 700 cities across the country that actually have these combined sewage and wastewater, stormwater systems, which creates these overflow problems when you have heavy rains or storms. And now you are seeing cities across the country, such as Kansas City, Grand Rapids in Michigan, Cincinnati, and others, look at smart sewer systems just like what they're doing in South Bend.
Josh Letterman with the smart technology below our city streets. Josh, thank you.
Our state law enforcement division and the sheriff are working around the clock to get information, following all leads. It is a tragic situation. The Murdoch family is well known and respected, and this is just tragic.
That's South Carolina's governor speaking today on Fox News about a murder mystery involving one of the state's most prominent families. Paul MURDO and his mother Maggie were found shot to death at the family hunting lodge on June 7th. No arrests have been made. But there is so much more surrounding this story. NBCNews.com staff writer Eric Ortiz joins me now to explain. And Eric, the MURDOs are a well-connected legal dynasty in the Palmetto State. Let's start with Paul and Maggie. Investigators say their deaths are a double homicide, but what more do we know?
Hi, Garrett. That's right. Paul was 22. He was a member of the MURDO family. These patriarchs for 3 generations have been synonymous with power and justice. As the top elected prosecutor in South Carolina's Low Country, the bodies of Paul and his mother Maggie were both found on the grounds of the MURDO estate, where the family has a hunting lodge. State investigators confirmed today that Paul's father and Maggie's husband, Alex, was the one who found their bodies after calling 911. And a local coroner told me that they were shot multiple times. Now, what we don't know are a lot of other things, like what kind of evidence there may be. Were there cameras on the property? So state investigators are giving very few details about whether there are any suspects or a possible motive.
And Eric, we know the son, Paul, was awaiting trial in connection with the death of a 19-year-old woman killed in a boat crash. Has the family of that woman reacted in any way to Paul's death? What are they saying?
Right. At the time of his death, Paul MURDO faced 3 felony counts related to allegedly causing the death of this young woman, Mallory Beach, during a night of heavy drinking 2 years ago. The case really put the MURDO family under this new type of public scrutiny and claims of preferential treatment for Paul MURDO, and he pleaded not guilty. The state prosecutor's office said this week that the case is not closed because the investigation continues. Meanwhile, there's also an open wrongful death lawsuit filed by this young woman's family. They've released a statement giving their condolences to the MURDOs and really hoping that the person involved in this case last week is brought to justice as well.
So there's 3 deaths involved in this now. Now there's actually a 4th. Most recently, the family's patriarch, Randolph MURDO III. This is Paul's grandfather, Maggie's father-in-law. He died at his residence. He was 81 and was the solicitor of the 14th Circuit, essentially the state's lawyer in front of the 14th Circuit, right? So we don't know his cause of death, but what are people saying about these 3 prominent family members all dying within just a few days of each other?
That's right. Randolph MURDO III was really this legal titan in his part of South Carolina. And you showed Governor McMaster earlier, and he actually awarded him the state's highest civilian honor after he retired. There's been no suggestion of foul play at all in his death. He was reportedly ill for a while. But during his funeral, he was remembered as this really loyal family man who loved his grandchildren and his family and this lineage that they have. So people just remain shocked that these tragedies could befall this family in a span of 3 days. And the rumor mill and intrigue in this case is sure to go on until the suspect is caught.
There's a lot more in this story. You can read it all, and I suspect the updates. Eric's full story is at NBCNews.com. Eric Ortiz, thank you.
Thanks.
The heat wave out west is just not letting up. Temps hitting triple digits from Montana to Southern California. There's not much relief in sight for the rest of the week either. Here's NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns.
Once again, millions of people under heat warnings and advisories. Numerous records will be shattered, not just today, but over the next couple of days and possibly into the weekend. And with the way the drought is, I mean, we may be setting record highs all summer long in some areas. Just ridiculous. So let's get into it. 43 million people are impacted with this current heat wave. Excessive heat warnings, Arizona, southern Nevada, also through California, up through Utah, and then a good chunk of Montana is exceptionally hot. And Montana is really the spot that's sticks out today. You see the white on the map here? These are the temperatures that we're showing you how much they are warmer than they are compared to normal. So today it's going to be possibly 107 degrees in Billings, Montana. Typically, that's 29 degrees warmer than it normally would be this time of year. So it's exceptionally hot. The hottest temperature ever recorded in Billings, by the way, in June was 106. So they have a chance of setting their all-time record hottest June temperature ever recorded this afternoon. Denver 100, Salt Lake City up to 105 today, Vegas, Phoenix, you get the idea. I mean, it's just incredibly warm. This is kind of what you'd expect maybe in the hottest week of July, maybe early August, even into tomorrow. It's going to stay very warm. 116 in Vegas, 116 in Phoenix. And by the time we even see the weekend come along, some of this will begin to spread out into the central plains. We do expect temperatures to be near 100 degrees in Kansas at the end of this week. And look at the temperatures in Phoenix. Thursday, 118. It cools off to 114, and Palm Springs stays very warm too, areas like Sacramento. Now, one thing in the West, when you get like a heat wave in the hottest time of summer, you say to yourself, well, there's two things you can do. You can go to the beach, which the water temperatures are always cool in the Pacific, so that's a good idea. Or you can go to the mountains. Not this time. What's unusual about this heat wave is that the temperatures are very warm, not just at the ground, but up thousands of feet in elevation. I mean, look at Flagstaff. That's at 7,000 feet elevation. That's pretty high. I mean, that's 91 degrees. Grand Junction, which is in the Rockies at 4,500 feet, is going to be 105 degrees on Thursday. So you get the idea here. It's more than just a heat wave for the West. And of course, we do have some fire danger out there too with the very dry conditions. So as you can see, I mean, this isn't just your typical heat wave. I mean, this is eye-opening stuff for late spring. Back to you.
A northern Illinois community under a cloud of thick black smoke after a massive explosion at a chemical plant. And officials say the fire could burn for several more days. NBC News correspondent Megan Fitzgerald has the latest from Rockton, Illinois.
Garrett, it's been well over 24 hours since the initial explosion, and you can see while this plume is going down, it's still smoldering. Fire officials still searching for the cause. Meanwhile, there's growing concern among officials here for the potential of an environmental nightmare.
A massive chemical fire in Rockton, Illinois is still burning with no end in sight.
This is going to be a several-day event to have all this product burned off.
The initial explosion happened early Monday morning at the Chem Tool plant just outside of Rockford, which makes greases, lubricants, and cleaning products.
Just see a big, like, of the smoke, which I thought was a cloud, but it turns out that was probably the initial explosion.
The blast prompting evacuations within a mile of the plant.
We're arriving on scene. I've got a 300 by 300 commercial structure. I have heavy smoke showing.
Some 70 employees were inside the plant when the blast happened. Incredibly, all of them made it out without any serious injuries.
When we first woke up, we didn't know what it was.
James Berger lives nearby and could feel the heat from the raging fire.
So you heard the explosion?
Oh, yeah, and multiple ones. Every time an explosion went off, the flames would go sky high.
Neighbors miles outside of town saw debris flying into their yard.
There was a lot of debris coming down. There was heavy smoke in the area, obviously lots of activity. It was just a lot of nervousness, not knowing what was happening.
Public health officials worried about air quality, urging residents up to 3 miles away to wear masks.
We've got an environmental concern of an immediate fire with chemicals, and then we have items that were not intended to burn.
ChemTool said in a statement that all the workers at the plant are safe, adding, "Our concern right now is for the safety of all of our employees and the surrounding community." The Illinois National Guard has been deployed to help more than 40 fire agencies already on scene as investigators search for answers.
Another environmental concern here is contaminated runoff making its way into a nearby river. And for that reason, firefighters are limiting the amount of water that they're pouring on the blaze, which is why it could burn for days.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.